Hello there, guys. This is Rob. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you're having a fantastic day and a fantastic week 1 of 2024. And today, we're going to be getting into huge spoilers for Metroid Dread, so I want that to be the very first thing that I say here at the beginning of this video, so you do know that we're going to spoil the heck out of Metroid Dread, and specifically the ending of Metroid Dread, because I want to talk about how one of the big reveals at the end of that game could be taken advantage of in future Metroid games, which could even mean, as crazy as it sounds, Metroid Prime 4. So, now that I've gotten the spoiler warning out of the way so that anyone who doesn't want the game spoiled has had a chance to turn away from the video, I can let you know, even though the title of the video, to be fair, will kind of be a spoiler in its own right, but what are you gonna do? I have to title the video what it is. So, as you can tell, what we're talking about is the revelation of the Metroid suit that Samus dons at the very end of Metroid Dread in her final last-ditch effort in the fight against Ravenbeak, in one of the most insane and incredible and mind-blowing and satisfying endings to a video game ever. I want to talk about this Metroid suit, how important it is to the overall story and lore of Metroid, what it means for Samus, and like I also said in the intro, how it could affect and be taken advantage of in future Metroid games. Naturally, I want to remind you that I am currently trying to cross 25,000 subscribers on the channel, and I'm hoping to do that in the next couple of months. So if this is your first video, I hope you consider subscribing to the channel, or if you've been watching for a while and not been subscribed, I hope that after this video, you finally decide to do so. So naturally, I think one of the first things we need to do is just quickly recap the introduction of the Metroid suit at the end of Metroid Dread, because the end of Metroid Dread contains some of the most fascinating and mind-blowing revelations the series has ever done, if not maybe the most mind-blowing revelations the series has ever done. And of course, I do have to remind you guys, I actually predicted one of the biggest swings that game took in its final moments, and I'm really proud of that, the fact that I was able to kind of predict with my fanship and knowledge of the series where they might be going in the story of Metroid Dread. It was only a guess at the time before the game released, and it turned out to be true. So as we know, in her final confrontation with Ravenbeak at the end of Metroid Dread, we learned that Samus's powers are the result of both Thoha and Makan tribe DNA, and the fact that, of course, Ravenbeak in a way is kind of her pseudo or surrogate father simply because of that DNA transplant she received when she was young, and so he gets to call her his daughter. She effectively kind of becomes his daughter, and he is kind of her father, like in a spiritual, genetic sense, right? And it's very fascinating, and beyond that, because of the events of Metroid Fusion, which takes place right before Metroid Dread, we of course know that Samus is infected with the X-Parasite. Scientists give her Metroid DNA to counteract that X-Parasite, and because of that, when she finally is fighting and close to losing her battle with Ravenbeak, that Metroid DNA within her basically makes her the final Metroid. She then harnesses that power to then become and create the Metroid suit in her final takedown of Ravenbeak. Now, of course, if you're watching this video, there's a 99% chance that you've already played the game and you've already beaten the game and you've already experienced all of these revelations that happen at the end. And what I was mentioning earlier when I said that I was able to predict where this game would go before it released, it is the revelation that she was effectively the final Metroid in the galaxy, right? Because that whole element going into this game was very strange and confusing, because in theory we thought that all of the Metroids were destroyed, and my general thought was that, well, if you think about it, she was given Metroid DNA before any of that happened in Metroid Fusion, the game that preceded the story of Metroid Dread. So it was kind of a natural conclusion that if they were going to continue to make Metroid games and call them Metroid and have that as a part of the general nomenclature of the series, that, of course, she would have to be the last Metroid because she had that DNA. And that whole final sequence with Ravenbeak, he actually does reveal to her that you are the last Metroid. He literally says that exact thing to her. And so the final sequence of Metroid Dread has so much going for it in terms of the Metroid suit, right? Because she harnesses that Metroid power, she is suddenly wearing this suit, it's the first time we've seen it. It's basically Samus going Super Saiyan, in effect, you could call that, because she's got the most insane, like, atomic level hyper beam we've ever seen. She uses that to finally take down and defeat the kind of Kraid-infused amalgamation version of Ravenbeak that she fights and wins the battle against in the end. And then as the planet ZDR is exploding and she's running back to her ship, she's using her screw attack and all of her different powers like at maximum. She is an unstoppable force with every weapon firing at full blast. It's incredible. And so to me, we're seeing something that, in my opinion, from a video game perspective, becomes a fantastic gameplay tool and an advancement of the lore and story and relevance to Samus that could be taken advantage of in future Metroid games. And that could come in the form of Metroid 6 or the next 2D Metroid or whatever game is the successor to Metroid Dread. Or it could come, and I know this sounds crazy, like I said in the beginning, there is a way that Retro and Nintendo could even work it into the story and the gameplay of Metroid Prime 4. Now, that's far less likely, and I'm not predicting that they will do it. I'm just saying that it's effectively an option on the table for them, given that we don't know anything about Metroid Prime 4 yet, and we don't know where in the timeline they're choosing to make this game take place. There is a chance, if they decide to go really crazy and make the events of Metroid Prime 4 happen so far in the future, so far past the conclusion of Metroid Prime 3, that the game could take place after Metroid Dread. And if they do that, then that means we have a Samus who is already part Metroid herself and would already have access to harnessing that Metroid suit ability. And so, even though it's a first-person game, it's not crazy for them to do something with that in Metroid Prime 4. How they would do it in Metroid Prime 4 could be very tricky. I could see them doing it one of two ways. One would be, and this would actually be kind of interesting to me if they went this route. One would be if you were to activate or harness the Metroid suit and start wearing it for some reason. It's not going to be like the other suits that Samus finds throughout her journey. She is part Metroid, and the combination of the X-Parasite and the Metroid DNA allows her to basically just harness this in whatever way they decide to tell us this. She doesn't have to find the Metroid suit in a planet somewhere. She just can access it, right? And so one of the ways they could do it from a gameplay perspective is, as soon as, you're playing Metroid Prime 4, it's in first person, as soon as you decide to activate or earn the ability to activate the Metroid suit for a period of time, what if the game actually shifts back to like a third person perspective? So we can also see how cool the suit looks like. And what if we just play Metroid Prime 4 in these Metroid suit sections in like a behind the shoulder camera angle view, third person view of Samus in the Metroid suit, and the way she can just be insanely athletic and powerful with the abilities of the Metroid suit, we're actually playing in third person. Something akin to Bayonetta, but not exactly Bayonetta. So don't overthink my words when I say that. But think about how Bayonetta is a third person, behind the back camera angle, fast-paced action, athletic kind of game. What if there's some sort of way for Nintendo and Retro to do that whenever she activates the Metroid suit? It's not like necessarily how I would predict or prefer them to do it, but it's an interesting thought, and I don't think it's a crazy thing for them to attempt. Now, the other way they could do it in Metroid Prime 4 would be something more akin to the Phazon ability, the Phazon power that she harnesses from the PED suit in Metroid Prime 3, where you just hold, I think it's the plus button. It's either the plus or the minus. It's been a while, but I'm pretty sure it's the plus button, right? On the Wii Remote, when you're playing Metroid Prime 3, she's wearing the PED suit, which is a Phazon-infused suit throughout the entire game of Metroid Prime 3. It's actually my favorite suit design of the entire franchise. And she's able to expel Phazon energy when she either gets overloaded from Phazon energy, or if you just activate it yourself by holding the plus button, and suddenly all of her attacks and her morph ball bombs and her beam, her arm cannon shots are Phazon-infused, super-powered attacks. And it's the way the world looks, the vision from her visor, the color palette of the world, everything changes because she temporarily activates Phazon as a part of her arsenal. So, in a similar fashion, if she remained in first person, what if Metroid Prime 4 allows you to activate Metroid suit powers, and it does something similar to activating the Phazon powers from Metroid Prime 3? Again, not so much a prediction, but I think these are the two ways that Nintendo could use a Metroid suit ability in a first-person Metroid Prime 4. However, if I was to rein this in and bring this back to reality, I'm going to remind you guys, I'm not predicting that Metroid Prime 4 will take place after Metroid Dread, and I'm not really predicting that they're going to find a way to make the Metroid suit work in Metroid Prime 4. I just wanted to discuss the small percentage and avenues in which Nintendo could go that route if they choose to. And I would be very excited and open to see how they would do it if they went that route. But let's be more realistic. It's not going to be Metroid Prime 4. It's going to be probably in Metroid 6, the game that would be the sequel or successor to Metroid Dread, the next 2D game. Or if they ever revisit just a standard 3D or third-person game in a 3D perspective that isn't a Prime game. You know, that's probably where we would see the Metroid suit come back. Some normal game that takes place right after Metroid Dread. How would Nintendo execute in that way? And I have to be honest, I think that the ending of Metroid Dread already gives us that template. We've already seen what it would be like to play a 2D perspective Metroid game, and a game that in theory would be the direct sequel to Metroid Dread, and have the Metroid suit and be super all-powerful. And one would have to think that maybe it's something that has a cooldown and she can use it for like 30 seconds at a time, but then it cools down for like 10 minutes or whatever. I'm just kind of spitting numbers out of my head. But you guys understand what I'm saying. It operates on a cooldown. Maybe she has to get collectible power-ups that fills up a meter that allows her to turn on the Metroid suit that, again, can only be used for a certain amount of time. Or if they wanted to be more restrictive about it, and this would disappoint me, they could make it something that she only activates at predetermined times based on the story or the cutscene, or maybe she only activates it when fighting certain kinds of bosses. So they could make it a very restricted ability, and the linear storytelling of the game would dictate when Samus would activate it. But I would hope that wouldn't be the case, because to me the full potential of the Metroid suit would be for Samus to be able to harness it at will as you, the player, chooses you want to start using these crazy unstoppable Metroid suit powers. But beyond the gameplay abilities, I also want to talk about the story implications, because honestly, just for me as a Metroid fan and a Samus fan, even more than how it could affect the gameplay is how it could affect Samus. I've been saying this for a long time, and you guys who've been following me know this. You know, I'm a lifelong Metroid fan since the original game on the NES. It's my favorite franchise. Metroid Prime on the GameCube is my favorite video game ever created. Metroid Dread, also amazing. Almost a 10 out of 10 to me. The game is incredible. And I think that there have been now 3 different moments that very significantly humanize Samus and allow us to see that she's a woman and a person and a human coping with the power she's been given, the missions she's been going on, and everything she has to deal with, right? There are 3 moments in 3 different games that have done this. One of them is Metroid Prime 3 and her corruption from Phazon that she's dealing with. I think that that's very well handled in that game, especially when you defeat the first boss. Is it pronounced Groganar? I might be mispronouncing the name. But the first main boss that you beat, the first time the corruption grows, and she has to take her helmet off and she starts vomiting up Phazon. Like, it's incredibly powerful. It's very sad and tragic. And then beyond that, throughout the game, you can see the reflection in her visor continue to become more corrupted with Phazon as she does. So that game humanizes Samus. The other game, everyone's gonna groan about, but I don't care. It is Metroid Other M and Metroid Fusion. Metroid Fusion and Other M really work in tandem to humanize Samus in a different way by discussing her past, by discussing her youth, what she went through with Adam Malkovich and being a part of the Galactic Federation when she was young, the brashness and her overzealousness as a warrior, the fact that it made her step away from Adam and step away from the Federation and become a sole bounty hunter, all of that stuff. Also her fear of Ridley that people really complain about, but that to me is actually a really powerful moment. Those moments in that game also humanize her in a different way. And if you hate the game, that's fine. I'm not talking about whether you like or dislike it. I'm just talking about what that game does for Samus as a character. And I think it does a good job of humanizing her. And then, obviously, the other one is Metroid Dread and everything we've been talking about in this whole video with her discovery of the Thoha and the Makan tribe, her relation to Ravenbeak, and her history, and realizing that Ravenbeak is like her dad and that she suddenly becomes part Metroid. Like, these are all elements in Metroid Dread that continue to humanize her and show us the woman and the person inside the suit. And so to kind of wrap this conversation up, the reason I bring all of these things up is to show you examples where these games and this franchise has chosen very specific moments and very specific titles to reveal more about Samus as a person and make us relate to her in a different way than just a cold, soulless, silent, bounty hunter assassin, which, don't get me wrong, is like one of my favorite parts about Samus, but I also find value in the humanization of her as a person and a woman. And following the events of Metroid Dread, and now that she's got this Metroid DNA and this Metroid suit element, I think that the next game that follows up Metroid Dread is in a great position to do a lot more with the lore and the characterization to Samus, and maybe to discuss and show us how she's adapting to the revelation that she's the last living Metroid, and adapting to the abilities of the Metroid suit. They could go in some very interesting, personal, introspective, exploratory elements of Samus the woman in that game simply because of the revelation of the Metroid suit. Maybe they choose not to do that and they just go very surface level and she can just become part Metroid suit and she can just kick ass and take names. And that'll be great. I will love that, do not get me wrong. But the Metroid lore nerd in me gets very excited if they decide to go one step deeper and to continue exploring Samus as a person. It's one of the many strengths of Metroid, and it's one of Nintendo's very few franchises that tries to humanize their main character and to explore the depths of their humanity. I mean, think about it. Other than like the Xenoblade games, which I love, by the way, there's not really another, well, in the Fire Emblem games, right? So you have Xenoblade, you have Fire Emblem, and Zelda does it very surface level, and I love Zelda, you guys know, but it's really Xenoblade and Fire Emblem as kind of JRPGs that are about the characters. And then there's Samus, man. Like, it's incredible the potential that they have in this next game to continue the lore of the Metroid suit, not only from a gameplay perspective, but from a story and a characterization perspective. It's definitely what I would like to see them do. It makes me very excited for the future. Could they do something in Metroid Prime 4? Like I discussed in this video, yes, they could, but I'm not expecting it. I think it's going to be Metroid 6. Whatever they do, I personally can't wait to see what it's going to be.